Hello and welcome to Leviathan News. It's August 31st, and we have some guests today. We have Alex Golubitsky, and we have Deo, who is back. And Deo actually asked a good question in our pre-show warm-up, and that was, what was it again? I'll let you throw this one out.
Yeah, like we had some discussions, and main question is like, what if Satoshi Nakamoto had a compliance officer? How would Bitcoin have evolved with a lot of advice?
Yeah, it wouldn't have, I don't think. I mean, I think that if you look at the history of it, right? Like Bitcoin got to be Bitcoin because people treated it like a novelty for so long, and then by the time it was adopted, the cat was out of the bag. But it's lightning in a bottle. There's never going to be another Bitcoin.
Speaking of the cat being out of the bag, and we'll get to the Uniswap story here in a minute, but we had the Grayscale decision, which came down on Friday last week, and that seems to be letting the cat out of the bag for institutions now. There's nothing more that the SEC can do to essentially keep a retail ETF, spot Bitcoin ETF, from hitting the market here soon. So it seems like we're about to see a shift. And Alex, what did you think of the language that was issued in that Grayscale decision? I mean, this was a court made up of appointees from the Obama administration, the Trump administration, I believe Jimmy Carter as well too. So it was quite a diverse cast of judges.
Yeah, I mean, two out of those three judges on that panel have specifically been talked about for positions on the Supreme Court. Judge Rao, Srinivasan. They're both. To say it's a heavy hitter panel on appellate circuit is kind of an understatement. So yeah, it's a huge deal, right? That they said that the SEC decision to deny Grayscale its ETF application was arbitrary and capricious,
and not just that, but incoherent as well too.
Yeah, and the arbitrary and capricious is critical. Because it refers to a specific legal standard, right? And it's a legal standard that's usually applied to the government, and it's difficult to convince a court that the government has acted arbitrarily. And so the fact that Grayscale reached that bar, and reading the opinion, they reached that bar, and it wasn't like a close call. For the DC Circuit panel, they were pretty emphatic that the SEC was arbitrary and capricious, and so I think it's the only thing I caution is that from a symbolic standpoint, it's huge. It's tough to overestimate how significant it is, because seeing a court of this caliber slap the hand of the SEC in such an emphatic fashion is a tremendous signal. But in terms of the actual practical reality of there being ETFs that are made up of digital assets, baskets of digital assets, etc., we're closer, certainly, but we're not. Procedurally, what happened is the DC Circuit has now sent this back to the SEC to make a less stupid decision, right? But they still have to go through the process of making the decision. And of course, now the signal is up to BlackRock and Fidelity and whoever else. Go ahead and file your ETF applications, because the SEC has to take a different approach. And so I think we'll see a flood of them. But the SEC is still a powerful administrative organization and can slow walk applications, can do a lot of things. So don't expect there to be, a Grayscale or Grayscale type ETF anytime in the immediate future. But what we know now is we will see them, right? It's just a question of when, not a question.
Yeah. Well, they would have to, because they approve these futures market ETPs, which the price is based on the spot market. And the reason for the SEC rejecting these spot market ETFs was that the spot market was filled with fraud manipulation that they couldn't detect. But the futures prices have tracked the spot prices 99% of the time. It tracks. So if the futures prices are tracking spot prices, and they were approved based on whatever sort of like data sharing agreements, surveillance agreements they had with whatever parties they're using. The argument just didn't make sense to not approve a spot ETF.
Well, and it didn't make sense from the perspective of comparing it to other commodity-based ETFs, right? Like we have, I mean, like very notorious examples of precious metal markets or like nickel, whatever markets being manipulated in like very impactful ways. And the SEC has never said, well, you can't have a ETF that has nickel futures in it for that reason.
Yeah. Well, my body is ready for a retail spot Bitcoin ETF. And I think for a lot of other people as well, too. 10 years on, the first ETF was filed 10 years ago by the Winklevoss twins. And hopefully we'll see adjudication and the light at the end of the tunnel. But the big news and the reason why that you came on today is that yesterday, Uniswap had a class action lawsuit thrown out of court by U.S. District Judge Catherine Polk Fiala. And the judge ruled that the Uniswap software cannot be held accountable for user losses or third-party damages. So the lawsuit had been filed in April 2022 by investors who claimed that Uniswap Labs and its founder, Hayden Adams, facilitated rampant fraud on the DEX by allowing these scam tokens to essentially proliferate. So the plaintiffs alleged that Uniswap had offered and sold unregistered securities through the sale of scam tokens. And in her ruling, the judge dismissed the case, stating that, quote, it defies logic that a drafter of computer code underlying a particular software platform could be liable for third parties' misuse of that platform, end quote. And she also noted that the current state of cryptocurrency regulation leaves investors without recourse in case of fraud. Hayden called the ruling based and said that it was highly motivating to see U.S. courts hold up arguments I've deeply felt for years, end quote. He also pointed out that the court had declined to stretch federal securities laws, suggesting that such expansions are the domain of Congress. Ha! I think this is something that we'll touch on. So the ruling is significant for the DeFi community as it's going to establish precedent for how code developers cannot be held responsible or liable for when they publish code that other people use to defraud or scam people. And it also sets a high bar for plaintiffs who seek to bring securities fraud cases against DeFi platforms. So pretty significant. What were your first thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, it's amazing that we now have a actual legal definition of a scam token. That's pretty cool. It's like, Your Honor, we actually call those shit coins, but we'll take scam token. So but I think that, well, I mean, the context of this case, right? Because it's not, at first blush, in terms of the litigants involved, it's actually not that significant because there's two private parties and they were going to face problems no matter what. But this particular judge, whose name I don't know how to pronounce either, is also the judge in the Coinbase versus SEC lawsuit. So she really telegraphed a lot in this opinion about her general take on the idea that tokens are de facto securities or commodities. She said, we just don't know. And moreover, she said, we need to know that we need Congress to tell us like what category these assets fit in. And to me, that telegraphs a lot to what's going to happen in the Coinbase case, because the SEC is not Congress. And, and so I think that she's going to be very skeptical of the SEC coming in and saying about Coinbase, well, look, they're an exchange because they list all these tokens that are securities because we, the SEC, decided that they're securities. And so I think that.
But is there?
Go ahead, Garrett.
Is there an argument it could cut the other direction where they're trying to throw one team gimme and then like throw the other team a gimme?
Sure, of course. I mean, and they're two separate cases, right? And judges like to be consistent, but they don't have to be consistent. So she could easily, something could happen in the Coinbase case that could cause her to have a contrary ruling. It's just one data point, as they say. And no, you're absolutely right. I mean, strictly speaking, we analyze the impact of this case on only that case and only that case's merits. And
it feels
I mean, it was critically the lawsuit by these plaintiffs was brought on the basis of securities law violations, right? So on the basis that Uniswap was being used to market unregistered securities, and that those securities specifically were these scam tokens.
Yeah, so just to look at the ruling, so she said that issuers who create ERC20 tokens are known as developers. Each of them theoretically could register their tokens with the SEC, but such registrations are few, as Congress and the courts have yet to make a definitive determination as to whether such tokens constitute securities, commodities, or something else.
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward. And the other thing that I thought was nice, very unique about this opinion, which I also think portends well for the Coinbase litigation, is that this judge really went out of her way to grapple with the technical underpinnings of how liquidity pools work, how ERC20 tokens work, and that type of thing, which we just have not seen very many courts do in token-related litigation in the U.S. We're much more likely to see courts be a little bit hand-wavy about what the tokens actually represent and how they function. And I mean, one other thing that was very interesting to me in this judge's opinion, which I think would probably fall in the category of dicta, but it's still an interesting commentary from her, is that she really got into how liquidity pools function from the view of U.S. law, right? And so there's a section in the opinion, I believe, where she talks about how when somebody contributes tokens to a liquidity pool, they still fundamentally own those tokens that are in the pool. And I think that's quite significant because there's a compelling argument that when you contribute tokens to a liquidity pool, what you've actually done is you've exchanged those tokens for the liquidity pool NFT that you get upon deposit, and that new token that you have is a new asset that's separate and apart from the tokens that you contributed to the LP. And I don't know that it's certainly not definitive, like her commentary on that's what U.S. law is, but it's almost like an opening salvo in the discussion, and I think it's an important discussion to have.
Yeah. So just to bring up that part of the ruling, she says, focusing next on LPs, the court observes that they deposit their token pairs into a given pool and are issued LP tokens in return. But just because the pool then holds the initial pair of tokens does not mean that the pool somehow holds title to them, especially as applied to software developers and Uni token holders, who at most can issue new versions and contracts, but not assume title.
Yeah, that's critical. I mean, that's really critical because it also, what she's getting at there, and I think is what's significant to her opinion that she's getting at is the idea that, like, if we all contribute tokens to an LP, we're not, from the view of this judge, we're not all in a partnership together, for example, or any type of joint venture. And I think that was an open issue from the perspective of U.S. law, which would be, if that is ultimately where U.S. law goes, which I don't think it will, that would be very detrimental, right? If you're all of a sudden construed to be in business with every other person who's contributed to the ETH USDC liquidity pool or something along those lines,
Can I don't know if you can answer this question, but if the idea that you control these tokens and there's not a swap that takes place when you deposit your tokens into the LP, would you be able to speculate on how that would affect like tax law for Uniswap LPs?
Yeah, so it's a really salient issue for tax, actually, and so to put it out the front, there's nothing in this district court decision that's going to bind the Treasury Department of the IRS one way or the other as to how to treat that transaction for tax purposes. But assuming that this view holds for tax purposes, it's actually incredibly important, right? Because I think that the traditional, to the extent there is traditional views about crypto taxation, the traditional view has been that when you deposit, for example, your ETH and USDC into the ETH USDC pool, you have a disposition of your ETH, right? Because you exchanged one token and you got another token back, which means that if you're, if you've been holding your ETH since 2018 or whatever, and then you deposit it into the pool, you have a huge gain recognition event, right? Because it's gone up 100x since then or whatever, and all that's treated as taxable gain, even though all you got in return, you actually lost USDC in that sense from a liquidity standpoint because it's now in the pool, and all you have is this new LP token. So that's quite critical from a tax standpoint. And then the other there's actually, and this gets a little bit technical, but the extent to which participating in a liquidity pool constitutes a trader business is, and so like if you're take a step back, if you treat the contribution of tokens to a liquidity pool and the receipt of your LP token in return as signifying, for example, like a joint venture, right, where the liquidity pool is a business and have an interest in that business, that treatment causes you to have, if you're a non-U.S. person, you to have taxable income in the U.S. if there's an argument that the business of the liquidity pool is happening in the U.S. And so potentially, if this logic in this opinion is adopted for tax purposes, it could tremendously limit the reach of the IRS to tax internationally different transactions specifically LP transactions in crypto, which would be a big deal. But again, I think we're a couple of years off from getting any kind of real concrete guidance from the IRS on that type of thing. And
well, just to expand,
I'm getting whiplash here.
Hold on, just to expand this point out before we move on. So the idea that when you deposit tokens, so when you swap ETH to WETH, right? This would be the most simplest case, right? That we could start with if we're going to go down this slippery slope. When I swap ETH to WETH, I'm not actually like disposing of my ETH, right? I'm just swapping it.
Yeah, that's unclear. I would say that is unclear in tax law, right? And
right.
So when I say that, a bunch of people, like, their jaws hit the floor, right? Because that sounds like absolute insanity, right? If I send my ETH to the WETH contract and I get WETH back, how the hell have I incurred? I don't have a gain, right? I have the exact same thing I had before when I used the contract, but like, and actually, it's
so if you take a house and you put a legal contract around it, it doesn't incur a taxable event, right?
Right. I mean, it's very difficult to like find any like analogous thing where you can just make some very minor change to an asset and consider it to be a complete disposition of the asset. But
so now I guess the next step would be like, if we start with WETH and then we say that's crazy, right? Now we go to like depositing ETH into Aave and getting back a ETH or a compound ETH, where it's a interest bearing, or it returns some sort of income, but you're not disposed of that ETH. You can pull it back typically at any time, and then from there the next step would be to go to like LSDs, right? LSDs would be kind of the final point, saying like, when I deposit my ETH and get back Steth or RETH or StakeFrax ETH, like, I'm not disposing of my original ETH. I'm just getting back a wrapper contract, which is doing other operations on the back end.
Yeah, I think you could even extrapolate it more broadly, right? Because you could actually say that this phenomenon is present in any ERC, any like 4626 type contract, right? Where you're using any type of like, where I contribute an asset to a smart contract, and in exchange, I get some type of receipt token, right? Which is fundamentally like always exchangeable for the underlying asset. And then, but you can have, as you all know, like 4626 type smart contracts can be very complex, and you can have a lot that goes into you can have a lot, or you can have a little that goes under the hood, right? Like WETH is like an extreme example of like, it's what, like 160 lines of code or something like that. It's very basic, like what WETH represents. But you can have, I think, LSDs represent more to the other side of the spectrum, where there's actually a lot that's happening that under the hood, so to speak, in this wrapper contract. And so this is, I think, one of the most critical issues actually in taxation of digital assets and crypto specifically in the US is, when do we look through these wrappers and when do we not look through these wrappers? Because if you look at the black letter of the guidance the IRS has put out up to this point, well, especially the prop regs that came out last week as well, last Friday, the IRS has really said, well, when you change one token for another token, it's a disposition, and it doesn't really matter what token A and token B are. As long as you get a token B instead of your token A, you dispose of token A in this taxable event. But I think that what the Treasury Department is slowly coming around to is this standard is completely unworkable. Like if I exchange WETH for USDC, okay, clearly I have a disposition there, right? That seems undebatable, that I've sold my WETH and I now have this sort of other fungible asset that represents $1. It makes sense to pay tax on that. But we're now getting to the point, especially with DeFi, where most transactions don't look like that, right? Most transactions are not actually that straightforward, and you are exchanging a token that represents perhaps some static store of value for a token that represents something dynamic that's happening. And then the Treasury Department, I feel like, still has not, even with the new prop rates, still has not answered the question of how do we analyze that dynamic activity that's happening under the hood of a wrap contract? Do we look through it, or do we just treat it as like a separate thing and all those gains get taxed on disposition? And maybe from a taxpayer standpoint, I want the simple view, right? Because like if I have a vault token, right? If I have a receipt token and there's something happening in that vault that's like generating a lot of gain, but I don't actually have to recognize that gain until I send my receipt token back for my original tokens, that's actually beneficial to the taxpayer because you now have tax deferral. And I don't think the IRS wants that. I don't think the IRS wants, if they do want that, like, phenomenal. Like, let me design your tax deferral tokens then, but I don't think the world is that simple.
Could you comment on like the broader playing field? Last time we talked to you, it was super bearish because of the Treasury stuff. This week it's super bullish. Like, which ways do you think it's going to play out when all these things get jammed together?
I'm still net bearish, man, because like I don't think that the SEC is the final boss. You know, to use the video game term, right? Like the SEC has been, and to the CFTC to a more limited extent, a tremendous pain in the ass for digital assets, and you know, there a lot of problems with them. But like, even if we get the SEC kind of under control and they keep getting their hands slapped in court, the final boss for crypto regulation is taxation, and more saliently, I think, money laundering regulations. Like we don't have an answer yet in the digital economy for how we can accommodate the Bank Secrecy Act. And you know, I think we were talking about like the OFAC litigation and everything the last time I was on. And yeah, I think I think we're going to keep taking L's on that front, and it's going to get increasingly harder to do the business that we do because of it.
Well, since the last time that we spoke, Treasury and the IRS did come out with some guidance that supposedly is going to come into effect in 2025, which in a broad sense, they essentially told everybody, if you can implement KYC, you have to.
Yeah.
If you run a front end, you have to have some sort of KYC AML protections. If you are a DAO, you can be held liable if you don't do this. If you are a MEV searcher and you're not excluding US IPs from your block building, you could also be held liable as well too. Like the list of even like Etherscan providing a website where you can read transactions and potentially write transactions to the network, also is going to have to implement KYC, and MetaMask as well too. I mean, honestly, the scope of the KYC AML implementation here would be just incredible.
Yeah, I gotta hop here, so I gotta go. But I want to come back on soon to talk about these prop regs, because there's just a ton there. I mean, I finally had time to read them. They're like 300 pages already.
Oh wow!
I finally had time to read them, and can probably, and I'd love to have a conversation with you guys about it, but it's a little too broad for a soundbite, so we'll have to do it another day.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. We'll respect your time, and we'll move on to some other news. Thanks, Alex, for being here.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Alex.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. So that was great to get an update on the Uniswap case. It's always nice to have an actual lawyer here who can provide some legal analysis instead of us who just, put our couch legal hats on and fire off some speculative ideas and opinions about things.
I think common law is still the best form of law, probably, Like,
yeah.
I think that's what the beauty about crypto. Like, if we design a better system, right? So it's like, yeah, that's basically us, right? But yeah, and then the question is, are we actually designing a better system? I don't know, but I think so. But
I hope so.
Yeah, it's a big problem a lot of times, right? Because there's so many scams, so many people that write on hard work of something. Yeah, I mean, I try to be a good person, right? But it's like we're trying to do something open, having open finance, open infrastructure, etc. And then unfortunately, there's a lot of scams that just ride on that wagon, or just general JPEG scams or something. And of course, those things are not good, but at the same time, I think it's good to have just an open market. It's like when people, how many free open markets are there still in the world? I think not that many. So
not that many.
At least one.
Yeah. Well, let's get on to some happier news. Curve deployed on Base, didn't they, Garrett?
This is a fun one.
I know. I saw the yields. It was pretty insane.
So I thought it was a bug at first, but it turns out it's accurate. So basically I won't get into the intricacies of like how it works, but basically Mitch inadvertently gave a full week's worth of rewards that was, instead of being distributed over the course of a week, distributed over the course of 3 hours. As a result, you saw 1,000,000% APYs, and it sparked this huge gold rush where within minutes, about $6 million of liquidity flowed into these pools. These pools became incredibly imbalanced because users didn't really care what tokens they were putting in. They were putting in like it was like 2 hops to put Bitcoin into the TriCrypto pool, so like it just was like super imbalanced. And then like this led to a second wave of traders trying to arbitrate this. So it was just complete and utter madness. After 3 hours, though, it wore off, but the TVLs kept going up. So Curve is already up to above 11 million as of this morning TVL on Base, which is putting it closer to the kind of top of the Base TVL leaderboards, which means like there's a fat-fingered accident by Michael, but it turned out to inadvertently be a good marketing strategy.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy actually that that the way that it happened. It just kind of appeared, didn't it? No notifications or anything. I just saw it on Twitter. So in other news, we also have Circle and Coinbase, who announced that native USDC is going to launch on Base this week. And here's the curve pools actually. So right now you can still get, if you have CRV USD TBTC, you can still make 200% with fully boosted on Base.
Here's what you would have seen last night, though. You would have seen.
Not bad. Oh wow! Look at that.
Oh wow! I love
and it's accurate as it turns out. But these APYs are variable, and in order for this APY to sustain itself, it would require Mitch depositing 150K Curve every 3 hours for the next year.
Wow. Have there been any discussions about like multi-chain issuance of CRV USD?
There's been some, but at the moment, I think the thing to remember is that like one of the reasons that Curve doesn't have a major cross-chain presence is because like historically it's like tried in some chains and kind of ignored some other chains, but it's a very small amount of Curve's like TVL and trading activity. So the second biggest TVL chain for Curve by would be Arbitrum, where it's about 1% of Curve's overall TVL. Like Curve is primarily focused on mainnet because that's where all the liquidity is. And
Yeah.
that being said,
Yeah.
like the base chain, the launch I think was a bit more successful. There's a lot of TVL there. Base, like as a chain, I'm super bullish on because like Coinbase has barely started tapping into the millions of users that it has on the Coinbase like web app. So once Coinbase starts pushing that, and you could imagine it like trying to push people to some of the like successful apps on their like friend tech, you could just imagine that like there's just going to be a constant stream of users, a constant stream of liquidity coming into it. So I'm pretty bullish on Base as a chain, and I think that we're going to see some big stuff coming there.
Yeah, and so yesterday Brian Armstrong actually came out and published a post where he said he's sharing 10 ideas on the things that he's most excited about. This is a video that he pushed out. And there's a blog post as well, too, where he essentially went into these 10 ideas. And you can see a picture here. I can't make it bigger, but I'll read them out, right? Let's see. So he's looking for, what has he got? A flat coin is one of them.
Does he not know about Frax?
Apparently not. Well, I bet they want it built with like USDC products. So like USDC and then the treasury support that they have. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. Oh no, it's gonna rug me. Okay, maybe I can't do that. On-chain reputation. Yeah, so on-chain reputation with DID was digital identity verification. On-chain AdWords. AngelList and Stripe Atlas for crypto, Job Task Marketplace, a privacy layer for L2s, P2P exchange, fully on-chain games, tokenizing RWAs, network states, and anything else. So, like,
so obviously doesn't know about the llamas either.
Yeah, exactly. I'll run this around to you guys. Like, which of these 10 ideas or topics or themes do you find most interesting in this post?
Yeah, so I do really think he hit the nail on the head. Like I'm, of course, joking about like the Frax and the llamas. We all are big fans of Brian Armstrong and everything that he's doing. So like this is like pretty squarely in the target zone when I look at this, and I keep saying we're so early. Like all these represent substantial opportunities that people are just starting to kind of bite off.
But they all have been tried, right? All of these concepts have been tried. It's just the timing, I guess, of the market.
Yeah, like most everything in crypto, if you've been around long enough, was tried 5 years ago when there was no one using it. But the thing that's going to change at some point is there will be more users. There will be more like easier onboarding, and someone's going to try something that failed 5 years ago that's going to work today.
What I miss in this overview is a DeFi, like more easier, user-friendly DeFi. So I don't really see a lot of financial use cases, or maybe
yeah, I think DeFi is becoming a dirty word just because there's so many like scams and casino games in DeFi.
I think the vast majority of people don't even know the word is out there, Like most people don't even know about it yet.
Let me just push back and say that maybe the design space for DeFi is less than the design space in other fields. So
I disagree. I think there's a whole field of things you can make for DeFi that's not there yet. But.
Sure. I mean, we don't have a robust and complex derivative space, but when you talk about like money markets and swaps and pretty much all the basic things that like retail is going to use, like Coinbase retail is going to use, like, do they really need to have a 1000x perpetual exchange based on, Uniswap LPs providing their capital so that people can trade with, right? Like these sorts of things I think are a little bit beyond the scope of what Coinbase is trying to do. They want more functional products that get paired with Coinbase itself. I think Coinbase wants to leverage its current tech stack so that they can help projects be integrated into Coinbase, right? So they talk about like on-chain reputation. I think that would be taking the KYC layer that Coinbase already has and the ability to like designate wallets that have gone through the Coinbase KYC process as, you know, having certain features on chain that could interact with certain apps and be whitelisted somehow.
To some degree,
yeah.
Oh yeah, to some degree, Coinbase is also playing a PR game, right? Like they're doing a lot of lobbying in DC, and they want things that play, you know, show that blockchain has real use cases that are kind of like PR friendly, and oftentimes are like Ponzi games and casino games aren't worth it.
Yeah, I question some of these, like on-chain AdWords. I don't particularly. Can anyone?
I think I'm bullish on that. I used to work at a startup that did advertising technology. That's a huge use case, I think, for not mainnet, but like a side chain.
What, to like advertise to people in Web3 somehow?
Not so much advertising, but just like you know how like there was like the inventory supply chain potential use case of blockchain where you could like have a really like robust tracking of like supply chains, like AdWords inventory and like confirming impressions and writing the impressions data. Like that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
It would need something like Solana, like style throughput to be able to like handle like AdWords inventory tracking. That's a huge, Base potentially. Base is so cheap.
What about like an AngelList Stripe Atlas for crypto, like capital formation? I mean, we seem like ICO craze, like you know, we're in kind of a Gitcoin, but Gitcoin's for like public goods. Yeah. I think he wants to have like a AngelList that helps people register their ideas in each country, filing paperwork as a DAO, and then helps them raise money as well too. To like have a pitch deck, essentially like bring the capital formation into a decentralized venue. So yeah, I maybe.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a. I think on-chain MMAs are also a really big thing. Mergers and acquisitions, where you can kind of close off certain information, reveal certain information, not even from a financial point of view, but also just from a blockchain use case point of view, where you like hide and show information based on certain criteria. Yeah,
I do like that he highlighted P2P transfers, because we've seen a noticeable decline in P2P transactions globally. A lot of the markets have been shut down. What was the Bitcoin P2P market? Like local Bitcoins, like pretty much gone at this point. Like there's not really great ways to do P2P transfers unless you're outside the United States and they have these, you know, exchanges set up, right? Like it just doesn't exist.
There's in Asia, there's something, there's I think there's more, but it's a bit underground, but it's a lot. You can easily do whatever with crypto in Asia.
Yeah, I mean, this is where Binance and OKX made their mark in Asia, was setting up these P2P markets, because you can't actually transfer fund. You can't like transfer. I can't make purchases of crypto, but I can do a P2P transfer and then just make a, you know, use one of the like Alipay or something to send somebody money for the crypto, right?
Yeah, that happens a lot here, many places.
Yeah, so we'll see how I mean, there was quite a good feedback on the Twitter post of people dropping links and other stuff that I would recommend if you're more interested in seeing some of the examples of what people had thought up or had been building with already. Last in our Coinbase roundup for today, Coinbase may introduce PYUSD, which is PayPal's USD, as well as other crypto exchanges potentially today, August 31st, contingent on liquidity conditions.
What do you mean? There's not enough liquidity for PYUSD?
No, I mean like the PYUSD has not really, I mean, where do you get PayPal USD?
I have no idea.
Exactly.
How do you even mint it? I don't know.
There's a new curve pool that rumor has it Frax is going to be incentivizing.
I saw that actually. It's a tri pool. It's a Frax base pool, PYUSD pool, and it had like $100 in it.
It definitely needs the incentive.
I don't trust the I lost money on PayPal twice, so I don't really trust PayPal USD, to be honest. I prefer Frax.
I think a lot of people do. But in other oh, here it is. Yeah. So wait, how much is there right now? Like $2,000?
Yeah, about $2,000. So the incentives could really do some good work.
Where do people even get it? I mean, that's the thing. What do you think about those the A value here? It seems 1,000 for the PYUSD.
That's not really a good setup. I guess they expect a lot of volatility in the.
Shouldn't it be like lower?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Or is it that like when the LP is forming that they would keep a higher A value, and then once it has significant like capital formation and size, then they could lower the A value?
I think so, probably.
I guess because they expect it might be redeemable. So I don't actually know who launched it. It could also just be that somebody launched it through the factory and didn't know what they were doing. Happens every now and then.
And in other stablecoin news, Binance will be phasing out support for BUSD stablecoin by February 2024. The decision comes after Paxos, the company that issues BUSD, was ordered by NYDFS, New York Department of Financial Services, NYDFS, to stop issuing new BUSD tokens. Binance has said that it will continue to support BUSD redemptions until February 2024. But it's no longer going to list the stablecoin on its exchange or provide any services related to BUSD. And they're telling people to move to a new stablecoin called, I believe, FDUSD.
What's different about that one? Why is that one going to be different? Did they share anything?
I don't think so. I think it's mainly just that FUSD is issued by First Digital, and that it doesn't have the overhang of this suit that was brought against it by the SEC. BUSD like issuance was paused. They were no longer able to grow the stablecoin anymore, so they had to switch to something else.
I don't trust also the Binance ETH or the Coinbase ETH, right? Like it's too centralized. We need more decentralized liquid derivatives.
Exactly. Yeah. But it comes and goes, especially with Binance, right? Can we get a 4, Garrett?
What is that? I don't even understand that reference for. I don't
get it either. He just came up with it one day. Maybe somebody has a backstory. There we go. Okay, so we got some.
I think it comes back to like at some point CZ had posted a list of like things he was going to focus on in the new year, and like number 4 on the list was like not ignoring things that are irrelevant. So it's kind of like that meme where it's like have problem, ignore problem, don't have problem.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about problems for MakerDAO. And yeah, so they recently had this their DSR through Spark, where deposits were getting 8%, right? And this led to like a surge in deposited supply as people were like flocking to the DAI stablecoin in search of high yields. But it really caused like a split in the community. Just a day or two after the new DSR went live, the new rates went live, Rune was already out there saying that they made a mistake and that they needed to lower the yields and it was unsustainable and that was going to lead to potential risks for DAI in the long term. And so there's an ongoing debate in the community right now about what should be done with the DSR.
I don't really understand the issue, because they could just make a step function, right? Say, it's 8% now, and if more comes in,
well, they lowered it. They lowered it to 5%, right?
But why did they do that algorithmically, like normal?
So at first, the 8% was completely dependent on TVL, but I think that they saw that most people that were using it were like ETH whales, who were just depositing Steth into Aave and then borrowing USDC at like 1 or 2% and then depositing that into the DSR and capturing like a 5% spread.
Of course, but what did they expect? They thought it was,
So Paper Imperium, who is a former MakerDAO insider, but still is quite, quite up to date on the politics, said that it just brought in whales to bleed the coffers by borrowing at less than the DAI savings rate, and it's just unsustainable. Even Rune said it was unsustainable. So it's questionable about what's going to happen there.
The end game plan is going to be
the end game.
The end game is going to take effect very soon. There was like an Unchained podcast from Rune. I listened to it, and I like Rune a lot, and I think he is onto something. But now it's all about execution, so it's going to be very exciting. What's going to happen? Oh, and MakerDAO token pumped. So
yeah,
so the market likes it.
Market does like it. We should have Paper Imperium on or Boris on. I'll reach out to them and see if we can get a MakerDAO show. Hey guys, guess this.
Yeah.
This is kind of crazy. Honestly, this is the craziest story of the day. So I didn't know this, but the only canonical deployment of Uniswap V2 is on Ethereum mainnet. Can you believe that? That's crazy. Like, for how far V2 has proliferated in the thousands of copycat exchanges, Uniswap never got around to making V2 multi-chain. And so they're finally putting up a temperature check to deploy Uniswap V2 on all chains with V3 already enabled.
Seems like a capital.
So when you use Uniswap on Arbitrum, for example, or Optimism, like who deployed it then?
I'm not exactly sure if it's probably like the same contract, but it's questionable who actually this is it. So anybody can deploy the Uniswap contract, but it's not actually deployed by the Uniswap router, right? And so
Wow.
this is where you like run into issues where we talked about that story 2 weeks ago where somebody had quietly deployed Uniswap contract on Base, but they had turned the fee switch on, and they had set the fee switch to an EOA that they controlled.
That's creative.
Yeah. So I think that looking back here, Uniswap kind of dropped the ball on this. They could have deployed V2, seeing how popular it was, to like every single chain back in 2021 and been ahead of the pack, like Curve was, right? Curve obviously is still an incumbent and moves slow, but still has been able to deploy natively to every chain almost that has like decent liquidity.
The counterpoint to that, I guess, would be that, like, as I said earlier, Curve gets like very little activity in terms of trading volume and TVL on these side chains. And like Uniswap is winning in so many metrics. Like, why would they change? Like, who are we to give them advice when what they're doing is working?
Mm-hmm.
Fair point.
Yeah. Yeah, let's comment on this because anyways, like just speculation and armchair stuff. I do want to talk about Bitcoin today because a project called, let me bring this up. Where did it go?
I'm still waiting for the BTC Maxi and debate.
Well, I think it's going to come, right? So here's an interesting story. This one actually perked my eye today. This is Stroom Network. It's a funny little name. Stroom Network raises $3.5 million to launch Bitcoin liquid staking on Lightning. So the idea here is that Lightning has a yield. So if you open state channels and maintain them on Lightning, you're going to earn a yield. It's small, but there is a yield. And I believe there is some other implementation on Lightning that would allow for this LSD issuance. And so what they can do is create a LSD style token for Bitcoin on Ethereum, where the WBTC or whatever sort of Bitcoin equivalent that's provided would go to increase state channel liquidity on Lightning.
How would that liquidity move over? I don't get that.
That's a good question. I don't actually know, but it is quite a big round, right? Like 3.5 million for this, especially for like a Bitcoin project as well too.
Well, you will be surprised. I know a couple of people that are building on Bitcoin stuff, and there's a lot of VCs that only finance Bitcoin startups. That apparently.
But it's really interesting. I mean, I think this could be one of the ways that a lot of like Ethereum people come back to Bitcoin, right? Like if I can earn a yield, even if it's like 1 to 2, 3% natively, by putting my Bitcoin into a Lightning channel, that might be enough to bring in significant liquidity. So right now on Lightning, there's, I believe, 5,000 BTC worth of liquidity. Let's check DeFi Llama to see what the stats are right now. So there's $126 million of liquidity locked, and that's 4,666 Bitcoin. And it's actually taken a hit recently. So if we look at the past year for 2023, it's pretty much flat. So it started the year at 3,860 Bitcoin, and now it's up to 4,620 Bitcoin. So like an 800 BTC increase, which honestly isn't that much comparatively to how much TVL there is in DeFi. Yeah.
But it's nothing.
3x as much WBTC on Ethereum.
Yeah. Imagine Bitcoin hodlers that just hodl their Bitcoin. Why would they not put it in a Lightning channel? Because I think it's technically not as easy, you know. I think maybe even staking ETH is the same or maybe even easier than setting up your own Lightning node or something like that. And I don't know.
Yeah. So here's a recent
Ethereum user experience is bad. Bitcoin user experience is way worse.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
another fair point.
I'd like to know actually what the base rate for Lightning yields are, right? Like how much do you actually make running a Lightning node? I see here, this is a recent story from CoinDesk that talks about how Magma, which is trying to create this like liner, which is like a LIBOR, but for Bitcoin. They said that yields for providing Lightning into these state channels is like 2 to 3%. So these are self-custodial yields.
But then you need to run your own node, right?
Well, you got to run it. You got to run channels.
But if you not run your own channel, it's just custodial staking, basically. And then if the other person closes their channel, they can just steal your money.
No, that's not how that's not how state channels work.
A Lightning node, right, or state channel? I don't. Okay.
No, a Lightning node opens up state channels. So you essentially like have to open channels to other nodes, and essentially create these.
Yeah, but in order to you need to run your own Lightning node, right? In order to open state channel.
Right. But I think it's something. I mean, it's like the Lightning is the only way to get native yield in Bitcoin. Elsewise, you have to get WBTC and bring it over to ETH.
I've been a Bitcoin max myself in the past when Ethereum was not out yet. So like I've been hearing about Lightning for a very long time, and I'm not very. I don't see it working.
Well, I mean, I think that it from a payments perspective, it kind of makes sense, right? Because you can make one set transfers instantaneously in this very secure environment. The only thing is that like using Lightning is not very. It's built for actual. Like, have you ever made a Lightning transaction?
Yeah, I made. I tried it in the beginning and failed a lot of times. And I kept trying, and now I'm have this Lightning wallet on my phone. I'm playing a game and I earned some Bitcoin, and then I can send it around. But the problem is a lot of the Lightning wallets are custodial wallets. So there was a whole discussion about the Tornado Cash, and the Bitcoiners were like, "Oh, the technology on Bitcoin is much better than than on Ethereum, blah blah blah." But a lot of things on Bitcoin are all custodial. So
yeah. Well, I think that if you're using it as a store, let's say you run a store, an actual coffee shop, right? And you're selling coffee and people want to pay with Bitcoin. Lightning Network actually isn't that bad, right? Because the way that it works is that you want to buy something and the store generates a QR code and you like scan it with Cash App or whatever sort of Bitcoin Lightning enabled wallet that you have, and then you can complete the transaction.
But the whole infrastructure is centralized. So the thing is, if Lightning ever will take off, they need to decentralize the infrastructure more and more. So you have Lightning is fine, you have Bitcoin, but the Lightning channels, you could make a technical argument. But then a lot of the infrastructure above that with the wallets, a lot of it is custodial. So then if there's mass adoption, let's say, then the government would just come in and just will kill it or regulate it, and then they have to have full control, right? So I think...
I mean, it's not how... I don't think you can do that with Lightning. Lightning is like pretty much mutable and...
custodial wallets. There's a lot of custodial wallets.
Yeah, but you could run a non-custodial Lightning wallet. I mean, it's relatively simple, right?
Okay.
And even Coinbase supports Lightning. Coinbase and Binance support Lightning now. So, if there ever was a case for Lightning to work out, then this is the time. Like I actually like Lightning. I think it's cool. I would love to see if it got actual adoption, but people like stablecoins better. They like the idea of having like an account-based transaction system where you know, even though it's less secure, it makes the user experience is different for it.
We need to know how much everything is in dollars. We count dollars. We don't count satoshis, and we don't count anything else. So that's the stablecoin case is so strong because of this simple fact that nothing like getting something you can relate to how much you can buy with and do stuff with. It's just it keeps the dollar very strong.
So this is a screenshot from Amboss's Twitter, just showing the yields for Lightning over the past year, and it looks like the yield is like 2 to 3%. At times, I'm not sure why it goes
transactions, which are minimal though, right? 2 to 3% of
Lightning
transactions.
There's actually, there's a lot of Lightning transactions actually. The primary use case for Lightning really is to transfer Bitcoin between exchanges, because it offers now that there is no Silvergate exchange network, where Silvergate was providing this service where you could instantaneously settle dollars between any crypto exchange, pretty much. That's got shut down, and there's no real replacement for it. Lightning kind of has been able to take some of that market share, not all of it, right? Because people want to settle in USD, but the ability to instantaneously swap BTC rapidly, right? Especially if you're a trader, back and forth, is positive for the space. So I wouldn't get too down on it.
Very confused. I need to do a deeper dive on Lightning. Any information? Where should we go to speed up on the development of Lightning?
It's just out there. There's supposedly there's stable coins that are coming to Lightning at some point. So last year we had the announcement of Taro, which was going to enable multi-asset Bitcoin and Lightning support. And this is essentially just means stable coins on Lightning, which would totally change what Lightning can provide, because I think a lot of the feedback that you saw when the whole El Salvador thing took place, when they made it a what is it called?
Yeah, exactly my point. It's all centralized.
Well, no. They made it like an acceptable. I can't remember the name. the currency, where it's like one of the currencies that has to be accepted everywhere, right? Inside of El Salvador.
Okay.
And they quickly found that like people didn't really want Bitcoin exposure. They wanted dollar exposure. And so after that, the Lightning people, and I believe it's talked about here in this blog, they essentially, so last year brought an explosion of growth to like Latin America, West Africa, and all these different places, right? So they found that adding stablecoin assets to Lightning would expand financial access to their communities. People don't want to hold Bitcoin. They want to hold dollars because they think in dollars because it's the global currency. And so what they're working on for Lightning now is this Taro upgrade, which would essentially allow for both dollar state channels and for Bitcoin state channels. So you could have like a much wider type of network that could settle both in Bitcoin and in dollars, which is honestly pretty cool. And using Lightning for what it is, it'd be I'm looking forward to seeing this come out. And there's also a bunch of other stuff. I mean, like at its core, Lightning is a really interesting network that nobody uses on a day-to-day basis. But if we did use it, it would make sense because like transactions are instantaneous and cost 1 sat. Like it's pretty cool. Like it's cheaper than anything that we have in DeFi land. Even transacting on Base
wheels
is
would be a bicycle.
I know. Even transacting on Base is more expensive, or Solana.
Could we make what about zero knowledge proofs, right? If you have ZK proofs networks, I think that's cheaper than Lightning theoretically.
No,
right?
it's not. So if we look at cryptofees.info, they actually have like L2 fees. And if we bring this up, we can see the current L2 fees. So Loopring is cheapest at 3 cents, but to swap tokens back and forth, 43 cents. Optimism is a 6 cent like fee for sending ETH, and then 11 cents to swap tokens. So with Lightning, again, it's like 1 sat or 2 sats, depending on what the network is.
But I think the problem, I mean, I'm a fan of Lightning also, but I think the problem is that there's no demand. And if there was a ton of demand, like if say there started to be like an array of Bitcoin stablecoins launching and being traded, demand would go up to the point where the fees become competitive. And it would just, I think you'll get to see things level out.
Yeah, and I think that demand is really hampered by just the shitty UX and the kind of like once you show somebody how to do a Lightning transaction, it kind of like clicks in their head. But the fact that like the person that you're sending money to has to like issue you a receipt first before you can actually send them any funds, it's kind of backwards for a lot of people. Like I said, it works for like transactions where you have a fixed cost item that you want to buy, like a coffee, or you want to buy a t-shirt or something, right? Like it makes a lot of sense then, because like if you think about going to Amazon, you go to Amazon, you pick all the items that you want out, and then you ask for a receipt, and the receipt tells you how much you need to settle the bill for. And then once that's done, you could just pay, right? And then it's done. Like once you pay with your credit card, you've settled the bill. But in DeFi land, like you essentially get somebody's wallet address, and then you, the user, have to determine how much money you're going to send to the person. And so, you know, this opens up the security space where, okay, hey, you could be like, you know, you could send the wrong amount. You could add an extra zero and send, you know, 2 million instead of 200,000 or something, right? Which happens a lot, more than it should. So I guess that's enough Lightning and Bitcoin chat for today. Everybody's here for DeFi, but Lightning is still DeFi, and we'll wrap it up on that.
Was actually good. Was quite refreshing to hear you guys speak about Lightning. Definitely not something we talk about, and nice to see your perspective on it.
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody. Deo, you especially, for being here.
Of course, guys. Awesome.
Also, Alex G for showing up. It's like the bat signal. Anytime like something legal and big happens, he like shows up, like Batman, to kind of run us through the educational legalese of what's happening. So that's going to wrap it up.
Definitely great.
Big G, DeFi advisor. Thank you so much. We'll see you and everybody else that's tuning in tomorrow. Peace.
See you guys. Bye-bye.